Hello and welcome to VLearn, Virtual Learning Network. This is Session 12, Administrative Theories, Behavioral Approach, Hubbard-Simon. Topics to be covered: Objective, Introduction, Classical Theory, Simon's Criticism, Place of Decision Making in Administration, Choice and Behavior, Value and Facts in the Decision Making, Hierarchy of Decision, Rationality, Programmed and non-programmed decisions. At the same time, decision making and administrative process, specialization, coordination, expertise, responsibilities, modes of organization influence, authority, organization loyalty, creations of efficiency, advice and information, training, critical evaluation. So in this session, we were actually going to understand the behavioralistic theory. Behavioral point of view से organization को define करने में, organization का clear cut idea देने में, they were playing a very important role. They were putting a very valuable preferences on the decision making process with the help of considering the behavior in the organization. As in the previous theories, yes, the humanistic concept arises in the organization. This was related to that only, that if we were considered the organization as in a social hub, so in this hub, yes, the people are living and people are performing. There was a social networking, and for that social networking, yes, there is an involvement of a behavior of every individual in the organization. So that is why this behavioral concept was come into a picture. This behavioral concept was highlighted the major part in the area. If you were considering the people as an important aspect or the important resources, so in that case, yes, we have to study the human behavior also. In judging the human behavior, yes, it is being very much complex and very much dynamic, because it's not as much easy to understand the concepts of human being, why human being is performing and how they were behaving. So this is what very complex concept to study. Now the classical theory of Simon and criticism. If we see the criticisms of Simon, yes, he criticized the principle of organization and described them as a mere proverb. They just pointed out that these all are just verbs, they are not as much essential in the organization. He basically pointed out that the contradictory inconsistency would be there. At the same time, they said there was no scientific validity was there. जो भी इससे previous principles of organization के create हुए थे, उन्हें एक proverb कहा गया. At the same time, they considered that that's a contradictory, inconsistent. At the same time, they are not universally relevant, which are the main important phenomena of that principles. In that case, Simon's cautioned their theoretical basis to analyze or explain the organization phenomena. Any theoretical construct should propose a frame of reference which should have a organizational validity. So it is this investigation they will lead to the growth of administrative behavior with a focus on the authorities and decision making. If we talk about the place of decision making in administration, in behavioral approach, yes, this is very much a popular concept, that the decision making process. How an individual going to take any decisions? The needs of taking decisions arises when there was a several alternative and course of actions open to an individual. When there wasn't a choices, when there wasn't an option, then only there wasn't a chance of a decisions making. Otherwise, there was not as a chance for the decision making. The rationality of a human being basically lies in the selecting such alternatives which can produce the maximum positive result, and yes, maximum negative results also. So that decision making is itself a very different concept which is leading to have the efficiency or minimizing the negative results. So in that case, yes, every organization, if we consider, without decision making, they can't perform. In fact, if we said that the managers or leaders are performing well, they were performing well because they were taking the right decisions at the right time. So in that case, this is the most important theory and the most important contribution in administration. Choices and behavior. If we talk about the human behavior, the consciousness and unconsciousness always perform a very important role in terms of what they like, what they don't, how they perform in a particular situations, what are the physical possibilities they have, what are the organizational effectiveness they have. These always affect the choices of the person. That means in what code of action they comes into, what code of conduct they come into, they all comes into that part and the choices. So in any mechanical actions, the choices and the actions are directly related. In that case, yes, condition reflects actions. The selection will have to be a product of a complex chain of an activity. If we talk about the values and facts in decisions making, yes, the effectiveness of a course of action basically depends upon the capacity of that decisions to attain the goals that are set. The choosing of a correct choice is related to the individual performance. Simons basically argues that the behavior of a member of any organization is partly determined by the purpose of the organization. So it is proposiveness which being intrications in the pattern of a behavior. Absence of a purpose rendered an organization meaningless. So the purpose provides the direction and a frame of reference and determine the things that are not to be done and the things that should not to be done. These are the initial factor. That is, if we are saying that for the decisions making it is always required choices. For that choices, we also required the values and the facts. Without having any information, how could a manager of an organization take any effective decisions? There was always a certain kind of information, certain kind of a facts would be there in their mind who influence them or who are creating this kind of a scenario that they need to perform in the different scenario. At the same time, apart from that information, they also have certain values, certain concepts of organization, certain bonds, certain principles and policies of the organization. In that case, yes, they basically performed in that decisional scenario. That is why they said that it's a very integration in the pattern of a behavior, very integrative. In that case, absence of purpose rendered an organization meaningless. In this process, even a minute decision governing a specific action is necessarily an application of broader decisions, which is related to the purposes and to the methods. So in that case, yes, this is related to the very minute decisions which are basically governing or functioning on the specific actions. Someone maintained that in so far as a decision, they basically considered that there was always a certain time, there will always be a value judgment. That means the people are judging and people are performing well and they were giving a certain judgments. So after, if they involve the implementation of such goals, their values and facts are only the premises and components which are intertwined. So people do not come to us as in a value decision or factual decisions, but they were considered as in a factual judgment. So this is what, yes, value judgments are there, but it is always required to judgment be a factual basis rather than on the very value basis. This is always required to have a certain information, certain proper facts and figures to be performed well. So the hierarchy of a decision, yes, the concept of purposiveness involves the notions of the hierarchy of decision. Each step downwards in the hierarchy consisting in the implementation of the goal set forth in the step immediately above. So the concept of the purposiveness is basically important if we talk about the hierarchy. Hierarchy in decision making, the normal flow in the organization of decision making is always a downward. They were flowing into the downward basis, and yes, goals set forth in the step immediately above. So behavior is basically a purposiveness in so far as it's guided by the general goal or the objectives of the organization. It is very much rational in so far as its selected alternatives which are conducive to achievement of the previously selected goals. So two important dimensions of behavior approaches there. First is the policy making, that it must be a good policy and implementation of that, making and implementation. At the same time, the involvement of a facts and values in the decision making. What kind of values, what kind of facts they were going to perform, how they were taken different decisions. This kind of decisions would be taken. And yes, at the same time, it highlights that the decisions at the very lower level involves more of a factual judgment. So it is always there that yes, it's required. These two things, agar hum ek hierarchy bolte hain, to yes, hierarchy is itself state that it's downward. So in that hierarchy, yes, there was two approaches, and that two approaches is Firstly, make your policies and then implement it, and then comes into your facts and values decision making in your organization. Now, what is rationality in the decision making? In a very complex situation which involve a large network of the decisions at different phases, the rationality in the decision making is basically bound to the surface. That is how the person is behaving in a particular situation. Decisions, sometime there was a very rational choices. That is, one concerned with the relation of the preferred behavior alter in terms of some system of the values. So it is a consequence of behavior which can evaluate the things. In that case, yes, the decision maker should also be able to anticipate the consciousness of each of the alternatives. They have 6 different type of rationalities: objective, subjective, conscious, deliberate, organizational, and personal. Simon basically rejects the total rationality as on the basis of the total unrealistic assumption. So, yes, Simon says that decisions are rational, but it is not as much affected as it's performed. So, yes, there are 6 different rationalities in the human behavior. 6 तरीके की rationalities होती हैं. ऑब्जेक्टिव बेस्ड भी हो सकता है, दैट पर्सन इज सो मच ऑब्जेक्टिव बेस्ड, जो एक पर्पस है, जो ऑब्जेक्ट है वो ऑब्जेक्ट कंसीडर ही नहीं किया जाए, so in that case उसका decision obviously negative side जाएगा. Maybe at the same time they were considering that particular object into a very huge consideration, so एक ये rational behavior आ गया. At the same time subject, जो एक subject है ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के अंदर, वो भी कभी कभी डिफर कर सकता है, तो सब्जेक्ट डिफर होगा अगर, so in that case yes, that will lead to have a more issues in the organization. At the same time, it may be conscious to be performed. Maybe the heads of the organization very much conscious to perform these certain activities or certain things on their behalf. They thought that if they perform this kind of things on their behalf, so they may harm them. So this kind of consciousness is always there in the heads. Personals, and yes, there was always a personal touch in decisions making. Not always, but yes, there are. So in that case, personal touch may affect that. That person may don't like the particular activity from happened in the situation. So he always be against of that. So personal viewpoint is always there. Organization concept is again very important consideration which is taken care. That is, maybe organization policies, organization factors are so much in that condition that they will affect the overall factors of the organization. And then the deliberate is very much considering part. That is what the person is considering one object as a very sincerely and serious matter, but the other not. So in that case, yes, this is always a deliberate also. So these are what the 6 factors which affects the decision making and bringing out the rationalities in the decisions. Now, the total rationality is based on the belief that the decision makers are the omniscient and they have a knowledge about the availabilities as well as. So yes, if we talk about the total rationality, the basic thing is the decision makers have a knowledge about the certain things and they always put their knowledges and the consciousness in that concept. At the same time, the decision makers have an unlimited computerization ability. They are unlimited in that concept. They believe that the decision maker has a capacity to put in the order all the possible consequences. Programmed and non-programmed decision making. If you talk about the sentence, yes, it's cleared about the very ideas. That ideas are that there are always a certain kind of decisions which are being programmed and non-programmed. Non-programmed are those programs which are not repeated and routine. They are immediately taken, or on the basis of emergency they take the decision. That is non-programmed. Whereas the programmed decisions are highly routine, repetitive. At the same time, they need certain kind of skills and knowledge to be imparted on that and then perform this activity. Decisions making, yes, always required a certain kind of calculation, but non-programmed decisions, they are new, novel and unstructured. So in that case, they are no cut and dried method. Decision making and administrative process. In that case, yes, 3 important steps was taken into the consideration. They are the segregation styles element in the decision-making process, establishing the procedures to select and determine these elements and communications of these elements. At the same time, organization decision-making process specifies the function of individual and allocate the authorities and also set the limit in history. So in that case, yes, decision-making and administrative process is very much related together, because in the administrative process, on the every step we required of decisions to be proper and to be taken better. What kind of decisions was basically taken in this process? The following are the structure of a behavioral choice. First is specialization. It is characteristic of organization. In this particular practice, tasks are allotted to the different level in the organization, and specialization may take often a form of vertical and horizontal division of labor. Specialization work. Administrative always want to perform well in the organization. In that concept, yes, they require the specialization task. They require the specialized people. In that case, they allot the different level in the organization, either vertical or horizontal. Coordination is another important factor which is required in the organization. Yes, they adopt in different decisions, and every decision is required a certain coordination in each other. No decision is very much different from the other because there was always a relatedness in the organization decision. So in each, he has to plan, and they do not communicate his, and yes, the chance of a good house construction are very blank. So in that case, they would achieve a better result if there was a good coordination in the decisions. Expertise. It always requires an expert to take good decisions for the process for the organizations. So subdivided so that all the processes require a particular skills and can perform by the particular person. Responsibility. The administrative organization seeks to enforce the conformity of the individual to norm laid down by the group, and yes, at the same time, the discretion given by the subordinate personnel is very much limited by the policy determined by the top administrative hierarchy. So in that case, autonomy in the decision making is restricted at a various level. So it is always required that administrative organization should be responsible towards the particular objective. They should be very subordinate, very personal. At the same time, the autonomy is in the decisions making. There must be self decisions in the decisions making. Now, the modes of organizational influence. How we can bring out the proper influence in the organization. The administrative organization basically defines the own modes and method to influence the decision-making process. Every organization have a different concepts of the decision-making, and they perform in a very different manner. If we talk about the decisions making are mainly depends upon the done partly through the structure and partly through the systematic influences on the individual, and they are more towards the influencing the behavior are the very much authority, organizational loyalty, of efficiency, advice and information and training should be there. In that mode of organizational influence, the first mode of defining the decision making of the every organization, if we stating that yes, every individual is very much different from the another organization, they are different in the decision making, so the factor which affects them, that is authority. Authority is basically the attention of the concept of power, how the power is flowing in your organization, how authority is flow in the organization. The superior does not seek to the convenience, but the subordinate, but the expert acceptance the order readily. In that case, this maintains that how much authority lied in the subordinate, as at the same time, how much it lies in the superior's hand. So in that case, yes, this kind of an authority flow also defines the decision-making concept in the organization. Organization loyalty is another factor to influence the organization concept. The first is, in any organization, its member tends to identify themselves with a group. They identify themselves as in a part of that group. So in that case, if they were identifying themselves as in a part of a group, so it is always required to bringing out that much of loyalty towards the organization. They take the decisions, keeping in view the interest of the organization, and then identify their steps. So in that case, the conceptions of the good that make him loyal enable him to take the decisions which would be conformity with the good of the organization. This is always required. So behavioral choices narrow down by the organization loyalty, and they facilitate the homogeneity of the behavior, rendering the group work possible. That is what basically the organization loyalty, which is always required. Then creations of efficiency is one of the there. Yes, the efficiency, how much the people or the skill which is organizing, hiring, they have a creative or the efficient. Yes, authority is and organization loyalty put a very important role in influencing the decisions, but the efficiency also influenced a very good role, because efficiency leads to give the shortest path and the cheapest mean in the attainment of the desired goal. Now, advice and information. In that case, the communication flow in an organization is always important on shaping the decision-making process. So, advice and information available to the individual is very much important input in making the factual judgment. Information is always required in influencing area of the decision-making. Training also. Training is always required to perform well. Training is always required to be good in the organization. Training is the advice which prepare the members of the organization to be satisfactory and decisions to equipped in the individual also. Now, critical evaluations. On the basis of critical evaluation, yes, the conceptual framework is not adequate. That was the first criticism which is arises in that. That it is not as proper and which is required in the organization. So it is what the first criticism. Second is it is a political. That is what very much political and polity systems, policy, political powers, political authorities. This kind of concept is very much involved in this. Third is value-free, neutral approaches is not helpful. If we consider the values, so in decision making, value play a very minimum role in the decisions making. So it's not affect as much. So these are the criticisms which actually evaluated on the behavioralistic theory. So the approach is very general and not particularly relevant. So this is very general concept and it's not as much relevant as required in the organization. And yes, the concept of authorities and rationale seeks to explain the human behavior from the idealistic point of view also. So they always require an idealistic point of view. So there are a few questions which you attempt to do it yourself. First is, what is the focus of someone's behavioral approach? Someone's behavioral approach ka kya focus hai, you have to define this. So yes, this is all about for the today's session. We are winding up here. Thank you so much. Happy learning. We learn.